Welcome to Amazing Aircooled Classics. In this video I'm going to explain how to recognize the year a Karmann Ghia was built. I will explain it to you with these three cars, 50s, 60s and the 70s, and also I will provide you a lot of pictures with the details where to look for to identify the correct year of a Karmann Ghia. So let's go. First step is to identify the decade. From the front it's easy to divide a car into the 50s, 60s and early and late 70s. By looking at the air intake wheels, the blinkers and the bumpers. For the lowlights, here you can clearly see why the 50s cars are called lowlight. The line of the fender is getting down towards the headlights, just like a Porsche 356 cars. From the 1960 model, the fenders were changed and also the car got bigger grills. From the 1970 model, the front indicator changed to the wraparound models that were continued until the last car produced in 1974.
Now let's go to the back.
During the 19 years the Karmann Ghia was built, the taillights were getting bigger and bigger due to regulations. In the 50s, the rear light was small. From the 1960 model year, the brake light got a separate section in the middle. From the 1970 model, the reverse light was integrated and the brake light and taillights were combined again in the middle part of the unit. And therefore a separate reflector was introduced underneath the taillight unit. That reflector disappeared again, but the taillight units went even bigger with the introduction of the 1972 model with the bigger bumpers. In step 2, let's start with the 70s models. For the difference between 73 and 74, you have to look at the brake warning light and the dashboard. In 72-73 is still located on the left side of the dash and there's a push button. In the middle, below the radio, there's a fasten seatbelt light. For 1974 only, the brake warning light was together with the fasten seatbelt light. As far as I know, it's the only possibility to identify a 1974 model without looking at the VIN number that is located on 4 different places. On the chassis, on the VIN plate in the front trunk, on the B-style behind the door, and since the 70 model also visible from the outside on a metal plate on the dash cover.
And by looking at the bumper mount on the late 70 cars, the 1972 model can already be uniquely identified. As the 73 and 74 models have a tube running through the front axle that was not on the 1972 model.
If you couldn't see the bumper tubes, other differences between 72 and the 73-74 models are that the wiper blades are black from 1973 and the fact that from 1973 the rear seat was gone. And that's a funny story. New rear seat belt regulations required a seatbelt for each potential passenger. By removing the rear seat, Volkswagen didn't have to introduce a seatbelt system for the rear seats anymore. Next, the 70-71 model. The 1971 model has a much larger defroster vent opening in the dash pad than the 68-70 models. It's 13 inches long. So by looking at the dash you can also identify a 70 against a 71. And while you look inside, also check the door mechanism. The 1970 still has a lock knob on the top of the door, while the 71 has a finger pull level in the door panel. Also, the front heater outlets are no longer cable controlled. Now the flap is operated at the outlook by a small lever. The last thing you can use is the script at the back of the deck lid. The 1970 model had the Volkswagen 1500 script. And from the 1971 model, the new Volkswagen script was introduced. Now, let's rewind for a moment. By looking at the front, you can easily recognize a 70s model and divide them into 70-71 and 72-74. And by looking at the brake fluid reservoir warning light, you can distinguish 73 and 74 models. By looking if a big bumper car doesn't have the tube in the front, you can identify a 72 car. For the 70-71 I told you 4 differences to look for, but for the overview I choose to use the defroster openings. Next are the 60s model. In general, 1966 divided the 60s in half. 1966 was the last year of the 6-volt system, the last year of the 5-slot rims with a unique 1966 only hubcap style. It was also the last year of the drum brakes up front. 1966 was the first year with an outside mirror located on the door instead of on the fender. And 66 was the only year with a Volkswagen 1300 engine. and also the Volkswagen 1300 script at the back of the car. This is all interesting knowledge, but let's go to the identification phase by looking at the dashboard again. 1966 model has a unique dashboard design with a strip in the middle and all knobs lined up in that strip. Pre-1966 cars have a dashboard in a body color. Post-1966 cars have a wood grain dashboard. 1966 is also the last year with the big speedo and clock. From 1967 until 1971, a small clock and a small gasoline gauge were used beside a big speedo. And by the way, that setup with the big speedo and big clock came back with the introduction of the 1972 model. Now let's check 67 until 69. The 1967 can also be uniquely identified with the dashboard, as the ignition switch is in an angle in the dashboard, and that was only used for 67 models. The 67 model has also a unique style inside rear view mirror with more rounded corners as the one used in 65 till 66. From 68, the whole inside rear view mirror was changed. To see the difference between a 68 and 69 by just looking at the dash, you have to check for a gas door release knob. If there's one, it's a 69 model. The gas door itself was already introduced in 1968, but for the first years it should be manually opened from the outside and therefore was designed with a finger opening. That is a unique feature for a 68 model. So instead of crawling in an uncomfortable position to check if there's a gas door release handle, it is much easier to just check the gas door opening itself. Another possibility to distinguish the 67 till 69 models is to check the seats. The 1968 model has a unique seat with integrated headrest. 67 doesn't have a headrest, and 69 and later cars have a separate removable headrest. Now, for the year identification sheet, it's possible to identify the 67, 68, 69 by just looking at the dash or by looking at the seats, but I choose the gas door feature as that's the most easiest to spot. Pre-1966 cars can be divided into many different subcategories by checking some specific details. Let's get back in time and start with the 1965 model. To identify a 65 car against earlier years, you have two easy recognizable changes. First, the already mentioned new design of the inside rear view mirror and sun visors. The sun visors are now secured on the edges instead of in the center. The other change introduced with the 1965 model is that the heater control knob was replaced by levers next to the handbrake. The 65 only has a box-shaped knobs, and for the 66 model year it was changed to round knobs. But my very early 96 model with the special teak interior still had the box-shaped knobs. Karmann is known to clear some old stocks before using new parts. Next, the 64. From the 64 model, the separate plastic radio cover was discontinued, and holes in the dashpad act as a speaker cover. Also, the horn mechanism on the steering wheel changed from the 1964 model to a flat bar and not a half round anymore. Another easy recognizable change is the inside door opening, and this style with a thin knob is only used for 2 years. A last difference that a lot of people use to identify pre-64 cars and later are the front turn indicators that change from the nice stylish looking ones with the chrome color to a less stylish one. And okay, I like the pre-64 style very much and believe that are the most nicest style turn indicators used on the Ghia. But well, that's my opinion. And to be completely honest with you, all the mentioned changes didn't start exactly with the VIN number that is considered as the start of the so-called 1946 model year. As I told you, Karmann continued to use old stock until the stock of that specific part was fully used. That brings us also to the vague definition of a model year, but I will come back to that when I discuss the lowlight period. For 1963, you need to check the nose badge and the deck lid. For the deck lid, the Volkswagen script on the left side was introduced with the 1963 model. 62 and earlier didn't have it. Also, the Karmann Ghia script changed inside, from the big 30 cm to a small 24 cm script. And the last, the nose badge, It's believed that from July 62, the new two-piece nose badge was introduced that replaced the nicer looking one-piece nose badge. The story is that it was redesigned to be able to use the Volkswagen part on both the Type 14 and the Type 33 models. To identify a 62 model, you have to look inside the car again and check two different things. First, the small metal piece to open and close the air outlet was introduced with the 1962 model. Before, they didn't have any. The second one is that the fuel reserve handle underneath the dashboard discontinued. While the 1960 model still had the round fuel tank used in the 50s, the 61 model got a newer fuel tank, but strangely enough they kept the fuel reserve handle underneath the dashboard. From 1962 it was discontinued. The difference between 60 and 61 is in the dashboard again. The 1960 is easy to identify. That was the last year that the choke button above the ignition key was used. And it was also the last year of the striped dashpad. From 1961 the dashpad was moved. The 1960 dash is therefore also unique, with the 60 steering wheel, but still with the same features as the late lowlight cars. The choke button is the easiest way to spot, but only very original examples have the correct striped dashpad. So, the exact year for a pre-66 car with the dashboard in the body color can be identified by many different details. For the overview, I just selected one that is easy to spot. And now we come to the 50s, also called the lowlight cars. First, and is very important, from the 6th of August 1959, the 1960 model was introduced, and since that day, changes and new color schemes were introduced with the new production started in August. For the lowlight years, there is no such thing as a model year. Changes and improvements come randomly during the year and not at a planned new production moment. To divide the lowlight cars into early and late lowlight, the dashboard change is the most logical to use. On 16 September 1957, the lowlight cars got a dash update, with among others a new steering wheel and a gas gauge in the middle. New color schemes were introduced a month earlier, and features like the new taillights and the new license plate lenses were introduced a month later. To define the late lowlight a step further, another dash change happened early 1959. To be more specific, on the 26th of January. The dashpad was introduced and the edges on the dashboard changed from the curved to straight to fit the dashpad. And some days earlier the sun visors changes from the hard plastic to the padded style. So these changes can be used to divide the lowlight into what people used to call 58 and 59 style. Dividing the early lowlights into 56 and 57, the most logical change is that the 1956 built car had two round white twist knobs, one on each end of the dash. From body, roughly 40,000, February 57, the Ghia got push-pull knob, located just on the left-hand side of the dash. And to finish the years, a Karmann Ghia built in 1955 has some very specific features, where the 3-row speaker grille is probably the most recognizable to identify a 55 built car. And there are many more changes in the lowlight periods, but to tell them in such a detail as I did for the 60s and 70s years, I will probably need another 15 minutes in this video. So maybe another time I can make a separate video just about all the changes in the lowlight period. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to do that. And now we're getting to the end of the video. With this video I gave you a 3-step system to identify the build or model year. First, identify the decade. Second, check the dashboard to identify certain years or smaller periods. And if you are really good, you can identify 10 out of the 20 years just by looking at the dash. Step 3, check some specific details to nail it to a certain build year. Well, I hope you liked that video and learned a lot of it. Let me know in the comments. Also, please like it, share it with your Karmann Ghia friends, and above all, subscribe to my YouTube channel for future videos.